I'm Ashley, and I was at Woodman for 18 months. I thought that I had it all together. I was a nurse, had a job, a good job, a house, car. My kids were doing well, and I got involved with a guy who introduced me to meth for the first time. In a matter of 6 months, it started to go downhill. I ended up losing things one by one. Car got repoed, got evicted, lost my job. Just happened that quickly. In a matter of a year and a half, I was in prison. I was not convicted of a felony drug charge, but my felony ended up being drug related because I was on drugs. And if I wouldn't have been on drugs, then I wouldn't have been doing the things that I was doing. So I actually had the opportunity to get probation, but because of my addiction, I didn't go to court. I didn't care. Had nothing to live for, and ended up on the run for almost a year. I was Gregg County's most wanted and ended up turning myself in on my daughter's birthday. And I actually prayed to God. I had shunned God for so long throughout my addiction because I knew the Lord and I knew I wasn't living the way that I should. So it was the first time I had prayed in a long time, but I prayed for Him to make things happen to where I would be able to turn myself in. And He did just that. And the judge was not happy about what I had done. So there was no pass go or collect $200. It was straight to prison. I did have a picture of what I looked like before, and it was actually a mugshot of the first time that I was arrested. And my skin was horrible. My eyes are just black, soulless, like I had no soul. My bones were protruding, I was just like a skeleton and barely alive. I mean, I wouldn't even say I was alive. I was dead in every sense of the word. So to look at that now is actually just so hopeful because it's crazy to see what God can do and how He can restore. For the longest time, or probably the first few months that I was incarcerated, I was just riddled with shame and guilt and regret. And I cried so much. I was so depressed. I went to the mental health counselors or whoever they are in there, and I was actually put on medication, and I just really, really struggled. But after being in church there and all the programs with the Faith-Based Dorm and getting into the presence of God there in worship, which was such a blessing to be able to worship, wholeheartedly worship in prison and not worry about, what other people are thinking or, do you look stupid or who cares, I mean, this is between you and God. This has nothing to do with anybody else. You're the one that is seeking someone to rescue you and save you from the life that you've went through. And so through that and through just all these transforming moments that I had while I was in there with just me and God, He was able to just open my eyes and show me, because I would go to sleep at night and I would just think of all the things that I was missing out on and what I'd done to my kids by not being there, and what were they thinking at night when they go to bed without their mom. And, I still get kind of teary-eyed just thinking about that. But God showed me over time that that was my time for him to prepare me. And that time that I was in prison was just a very small sacrifice for the amount of time that I was going to really be there for my kids whenever I came home. And that this time was the time for me to prepare myself and get the tools and the resources that I needed to be able to cope with life whenever I came home, and not run to a drug or alcohol or pills or something like that to help me cope, but to actually turn to him and keep my eyes on him and trust in him that I can do right and not rely on those things, and that I can get through life and be happier than I've ever been. And he showed me, I don't know how many times, that that was my identity before, and that everything from this point on is new. You're a new creation. It took a little while, but once I realized that and I let that sink in and realized my identity was in him, then that all changed. I didn't cry anymore. I wasn't depressed. I didn't have to take medication. I was happy. I was so full of joy. That was just the pivotal turning point, I think, while I was in prison, that gave me the strength and the power to be able to look at these other women that came in that were how I was, and just beat down and depressed and desperate, and just to let them know that there's hope. I am so involved in church. The first Sunday that I was home, I was in church. I got involved. I joined the church, which before I never was a member, because it wasn't anything consistent that I was willing to do. I wasn't willing to make that commitment. But one Sunday, our preacher, he talked about covenants, and that's the name of our church, is New Covenant Church. And he's real big on covenant. And so one of his sermons on a Sunday was about being a covenant maker instead of a covenant breaker. And that spoke volumes to me, because I think in my life I've always been a covenant breaker. Nothing was ever so important to me that I would uphold my word and uphold a commitment. I was always just if I felt like it, great. If I didn't, so what? I never really was all in with anything. And I knew that in order to stay clean and to be happy and to be blessed by God, and just have everything that he wanted me to have, I needed to make that commitment and just wholeheartedly keep that. So I joined the church, and I started going to all the classes they offered. It started out with the essentials class, and just foundational principles, spirit empowered living, spiritual gifts, things like that. And I just needed all of that to be able to grow and continue my walk with God. And so after I had got out June 5th. The following June 1st, so exactly almost a year later, just a few days shy, I got baptized. And it was like, I don't know, I think that's what sealed the deal. Not only has God just blessed me so much more than I could even imagine, but I've gained his strength and his power, and he's given me the ability to stay clean and stay on the right track, and just make the next right choice to follow him in my life. And I serve in the church. I teach 4s and 5s Sunday school, which is amazing. They're awesome. So I just try to stay really involved with church, and that's a huge part of my recovery in my sobriety is just having that family and that support and just knowing that they're there. And it's also accountability, you know. So as long as you put yourself in the right environment, then he'll do the rest, you know. For the woman in prison that feels like there's no hope and that you've gone too far, that's a lie. And that's a lie straight from Satan, and that's a lie to keep you where you're at and to feel like you're never going to overcome this addiction or your circumstances or your past. But I'm telling you right now that you can, and that God can change you from the inside out. He can change your circumstances. He can change everything about you because He's done that for me. You know, even things that I have grown up with, things that I have said that, oh, well, this is just who I am. And, you know, this is the way that I'll always be. God's shown me that it's not. You know, I used to be one to cuss all the time. I mean, I had a filthy mouth. I was raised with men in the oil field. My brother's a Marine. You know, at my house, it's nasty talking, you know, the majority of the time. And I just thought, okay, well, I was just one that had a bad mouth, you know. And I thought that's how I'd always be. But it's not. And not only do I not cuss now, but and that may seem like something small and petty to someone, but to me it's huge because not only do I not choose to have that kind of language anymore because that's how I know that God wants me to be, is to be pure and, you know, not talk that way, but He'll give you the power to do so, and you won't even think about it. You won't even think twice. But now, whenever I'm hearing a movie or a TV show or something and people are saying a lot of cuss words, like I can't even stand to hear it, you know? And that just goes to show me that it's crazy what God can do in you. In your mind, He can retrain your brain to actually do things different, to think different, give you new perspectives, new outlooks, you know. So when you think that it's something that you'll never change or you'll never get out of, that's a lie. I mean, it's an absolute lie. I'm Ashley. I was in prison for 18 months, and I have been truly changed by God's grace.